Hello everybody, welcome to History Surfer. This is Dr. A. I'm showing the view of the western approach to the harbor in Nassau. I am standing on top of one of the parts of Fort Charlotte. You can see the lighthouse over there. And the main part of the fort is over here. I don't know if you could actually see it. The trees are kind of in the way, but we're going to go up there. We're going to talk about Fort Charlotte today. Fort Charlotte was built by Lord Dunmore, who also built Fort Fincastle. Never saw action. And there's a lot of history about it and how it had a flawed approach to it. But Dunmore was the last royal governor in Virginia, and he feared invasion, so he had these two forts built during his governorship. He was governor here from 1787 to 1796, and there's lots of dates when this fort was started. No one has, I don't think, a definitive date of all the research I've done, but maybe we're going to have a guide today. Maybe she has one. And it was built over a period of 40 years. Excuse me, 30 years. The naming of the fort, there's two stories for that. One that it was named after George III's wife, the Queen, and one that it was named after Lord Dunmore's wife, whose name was also Charlotte. So, hey, we'll see what we learned today. Hope you guys enjoy. We'll see you at the fort.
1789. The fort here was built in anticipation of a French invasion. The French, they never showed up, so the fort saw no action. But they were here and they were ready. This area that we're standing on right below us, this is called the Ravelin. It was built to store over 500 pounds of gunpowder. The doorway that locates to the Ravelin are located downstairs. The bridge that we're now crossing, at one time, this was a drawbridge. You can tell by those groove marks that's on both sides of the wall. Below this bridge, this was a dry mouth, never intended for water, so water never flowed. They planted prickly pears like cactus to create a hindrance for an attacking enemy. I guess they wanted to get those points across.
You can see the archway here. These arches are built for fortifications. And there's a lot of gunpowder actually stored here at one time. But here you can see they have a little signage, so you can go through here yourself. You do not have to have a guide. But these are the people whose stories is told here. Isaac Hopkins was the person who saw the last battle of the American Revolution. And he was here with John Paul Jones. And they took New Providence in secret, kind of, from Fort Montague. They were looking for gunpowder, but it was gone. And then here's Lord Dunmore. He's the Earl of Dunmore. He's Scottish. His name is John Murray, as you can see. He'd been the governor of Virginia, the last royal governor. And he came here as the royal governor and built these two forts, Fort Charlotte, Fort Fincastle. He also had a plantation out on Long Island, Bahamas. And I do believe one, I want to say, in Eleuthera, if I remember correctly. This was about 350 slaves working here at any given time. And the mortality rate would have been atrocious for slaves. It was not a good life. You know, we all know this, but you can see their efforts here. I'm always amazed by this. You can see the chisel marks in the stone. This is all limestone, all carved by hand. Here we can go to the back of this part of the fort. And this is where they set the shot. Hot shot was traditionally used. If you watch another video I did, here you can actually see the ovens where they heated the balls, the cannonballs, and made what was called hot shot. That would have just destroyed a wooden sailing vessel, as you can imagine. It's typical though for the period. There's lots of graffiti here. Most of this, a lot of it's carved by the people, the soldiers who were here. I'll show you the really good one. There's a sailing ship one, but it's definitely boring. There's no battles. There's nothing fun out here. It's just hot and boring. There's the best bit of graffiti. And you can see who carved it. I'm gonna go back into the dungeon. Well, I was in the dungeon before, I should say, if you didn't see that part or if I didn't include it. And as we go down in here, it's not really a dungeon. No one was ever really held here, but it was storage for, it's very dark here. Gotta be really careful walking down these steps. It was storage for gunpowder. And this is where the slaves would have lived. Down in here, you can see, again, that was the well, I filmed that, and then here's the uniform the slaves would have worn. And walking through here, you can see various parts, like this is more storage for gunpowder. We're gonna come around that way. And this is all where people slept. If you go down in here, let's go through here real quick. You can see where the holes were for the bunks. Right there. And then these channels carved into the wall here. It's really amazing that they could carve this out of solid limestone. And this is a gun storage area. And here's the uniform to show you of the British soldiers who would have been up here. And just imagine all of their clothing was wool. Slaves and soldiers. That's how they were dressed. So, hey.
That's not the same. It took 136 of the slaves to build our camps, but during their stay, many of the slaves died. They died because they had poor ventilation area, not enough room for breathing. They got bitten from mosquito and they caught malaria.
Yeah.
As we came down the steps, what you said,
So this is made with no electricity and just with wooden cars.
they used lanterns.
Ah.
No electricity was here at the time.
Yeah.
So they had to carve all of this out of one big stone, which is limestone. They carved, they shaped it, and they designed it to be able to lay.
We're in the Dunmore
Now, this
area.
one right here, we saw
This is where they had gunpowder. And the slaves
And that was
lived.
their only form of ventilation that they had. They slept in rooms like these, they call it their sleeping quarters. Each room slept up to 40 slaves except for this room because this is where the gunpowder would have been kept. This room over here would have also been used as a holding cell.
So there were actually 3 forts here at Fort Charlotte. I don't know if, while I was filming if she said that, but that was our guide, Shanique. She was very nice, very informative. I recommend people take a guide if they've never been up here and they don't know anything. But they added 2 forts, Fort Stanley and Fort DRC. So actually, Fort Charlotte is 3 forts in one. So let's look up. You can actually see Fort Darcy there. And that is not accessible. But this is part of, I'm pretty sure, Fort Stanley. So it's interesting. It evolved. But you know, the fact that it never saw any action, it's not, I think they de-garrisoned it in the 19th century. I would have to check that, but hey, it's worth a trip up here if you're into history. And there's where we first came in. There's the walkway that would have been a drawbridge. And as our guide said, it is a dry moat. They would have put a lot of prickly plants in. I've read a bunch of different things that maybe spears were in there, but you can see in the distance too the new port today. And there's the cruise ships that are in today. Lots of people here. Used to buy tickets here One thing I didn't know that I learned today was the water was closer, and that all of Arawak Key down there, see where I'm pointing? That used to be water, and they was backfilled from judging the channel for the deeper ship hulls.